Welcome to Q&A episode 3, where I take your guys' questions and answer them in a bit more of a short form way, whether it be on John Mayer's gear, John Frusciante's gear, other guitar players we're all interested in tones and gear, even my own gear journey. These topics where it just doesn't quite necessitate an entire video dedicated to one of these questions, so I can just kind of rapid fire answers off for you guys. If you want your question featured in the next episode, leave it in the comments down below, as that's where I'll be pulling from for every video kind of moving forward, predominantly the YouTube comment section. So if you got a question, leave it down in the comments below, and let's get right on into episode 3. KVNG asks, can you comment on John's use of the Strymon OB-1 boost/compressor pedal? It shows up on Google whenever you search for John Mayer boost pedal. The reason why this pedal, I feel like, shows up a little bit more than is justified is because the shot of the board that it's featured on is one of the most high resolution dead-on shots of John's pedal board that we've ever gotten. So naturally, a lot of people, I feel like, almost incorrectly use that shot, that version of the pedal board, as a really good reference point in terms of John's gear. Sure, it has a lot of the fundamentals on it, but in terms of the grand scheme of things, this was from Dead & Company's summer tour in 2016. This version of the pedal board did not last that long, so even though it has a lot of the fundamentals on it, in the context of like the OB-1 boost compressor pedal, for example, the fact that it gets brought up, you see in different articles online, different databases, even there was an actual magazine article that heavily featured it as a pedal that John used when he only used it for like a couple months, and even then, the context of it, we just don't know. So I feel like just because that shot of the board is so good, it's a pedal that keeps getting brought up just because it's a pedal board shot that a lot of people go to. I'm sure it sounds fantastic, but the only thing that really matters is if you try it out and you really like it, then I'd say go for it and use it. If John threw it on a board at some point, it's obviously something that he liked, but also the indication that he never really stuck with it is something to keep in mind as well. But again, at the end of the day, if you try it out and you like it, that's really all that matters. Like all Strymon stuff, I'm sure it's fantastic. And I just really like the name, OB-1. It's very clearly a Star Wars reference, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so I think it's a cool pedal, but it's a boost pedal and compressor pedal with Dead & Company. I have really no idea the exact context that John used it in, but even with just what it is, it'd be pretty interchangeable with other boost and compressor pedals also. So I wouldn't really think of it as too key or really that important at all in terms of John's sound, just because it's on a very high resolution dead-on shot of the board is why you see it brought up a lot more than it really should be. Warren Yang SD1 asks, can you give some tips about setting the Klon and TS10 for Sob Rock Tour tone? If you're wanting to do the Sob Rock thing, the best advice I can give you is just set it so that the TS10 or the Tube Screamer is going into your Klon style of drive. That's going to be kind of the main key thing that I can give you advice on in this context. Giving advice in terms of how to set gain pedals especially is really difficult because they aren't universal. They're a lot more dependent on the guitar that you're using, the pickups, what other pedals you have in the chain, your amp rig and everything. So I can't just give you real settings and then say that they'll translate equally to your own rig. The best advice I can give you when it comes to this kind of stuff is just to use your ear, but I would set the Klon style of drive with maybe a little bit more gain than you think, and as long as the TS10 is giving you kind of that nice rhythm tone, the Klon gives you a nice volume jump and a bit of a gain boost on top of it when you stack them together, you're going in the right direction. But giving advice in terms of actual drive pedals is really hard without the context of your rig. Just use your ear, whatever sounds good to you, I'm sure is going to sound great. HMK Music 28 asks, can I get the JM3 tone with the non-Keeley modded blues driver? Also, which one is better for the JM3 tone, blues breaker or Keeley modded blues driver? I'm sure you can get a pretty good tone with a standard blues driver. However, I would just recommend you go out and get the super fat mod from Keeley. It's just that circuit with the Keeley Fat mod, and then they just expand upon it a little bit based on conversations I've had with Robert Keeley. It's basically the exact same pedal, they've just made it their own at that point. So it's a really great pedal, relatively affordable as well. I would just say go for that one. I've never played a standard blues driver, but I know the Keeley mod does do something to that pedal just to make it a lot better. So I would just keep that in mind. And in terms of whether or not the Blues Breaker or Blues Driver is better for the Mayer trio tone, I think that would kind of depend on what era specifically you're referring to. If you're referring to the 2005 original trio era, I would say the Blues Driver just sounds, it just has that thing. Like, you think of the bass tone for like Who Did You Think I Was, for example, it kind of just does that sound really well. But if you're wanting more of the Where the Light Is trio tone, I would lean a lot more towards the Blues Breaker instead. Best case scenario, you just do both. You can get great trio tones with both of them. They're not doing the heavy lifting in terms of the gain stacking either. Really, it's those pedals pushing into your tube screamer that give you that lead tone as well, and both will do a pretty good job of it. Alejandro Fulfilled 4717 asks, is the Brown amplification carbon a good BB style overdrive for replicating JM's Continuum Where the Light Is tone? I've never played one, but Brown amplification makes some pretty incredible stuff, so I have no doubt in my mind that that would be just a really good Blues Breaker style of pedal. Again, like I've kind of mentioned earlier, if you like it in the context of your rig and you're happy with the tones that you're getting, that's really what matters. Christopher Dunn 974 asks, has Frusciante always used his Marshalls as a clean platform essentially? I've never seen anything about him using his amp drive channel. Basically, yeah, I wouldn't say that his Marshalls are necessarily clean. They sit on that edge of where you're starting to get into that crunch territory, and that's kind of where the whole concept of where Frusciante's rig seems straightforward, but it kind of also isn't, because you have the WH10, the original version, at least if you're thinking like Stadium Arcadium, by the way, eras, that's doing something to his tone, and then you have the CE1 preamp that's also pushing that amp just a tiny bit more to give it that like slight crunchy, clean sort of sound. But basically, for all intents and purposes, yes, Frusciante really gets any of his distortion sounds from the DS2. It's kind of mainly what you're doing there. If you want to think of even like the Can't Stop tone, for example, I've made a video a couple years back, I think now at this point, where I gave some examples of Frusciante using the MXR microamp just to push his amps a little bit more, make it a little bit more punchy for Can't Stop. So that's kind of, your crunchiest clean tone that he would get. But otherwise, you think of something like Under the Bridge, for example, that's just the beautiful cleans of the Marshall with mainly that C1 preamp just pushing them a tiny bit. In terms of using the like a lead channel in an amplifier, back at least like the Stadium Arcadium era when John had two Silver Jubilees on either side of the Marshall Major, the second Jubilee was used as what they called the slash rig, which John did use the lead channel in that amplifier. When you think of a song like Ready Made, that's what John was actually using for that tone. So it was a very specific use case in terms of the lead channel, but it's something he did do just for Ready Made. And there is one other song that he would use that exact rig for. I just can't for the life of me remember which one it was. If you guys remember, leave it in the comments down below, but Ready Made is the main one for the lead channel of the Silver Jubilee. Tennis Racket Guitar 1659 asks, would you go with the Silver Sky or Stratocaster for JM tones? So obviously asking me personally, my kind of gear journey in terms of a Strat went from my Mayer signature Fender Stratocaster to a Silver Sky to my custom shop 64 Stratocaster. So right there, that's kind of the answer. I love the Silver Sky. I'd love to have another one at some point because I think it does do a lot of those tones really well, and they're just great guitars. They play super well, very comfortable to play in my opinion, especially the necks. I really do love the necks on the Silver Sky, but for me, I just personally bond more with a Strat. Like mine's got a Journeyman Relic, so it's a tiny bit beat up, not crazily, but it's just something that as I play it and as the guitar ages along with me, I'll just bond a little bit more to than just a standard Silver Sky. So personally, I'm just partial to Strats in that way, but you can't really go wrong either way. Jojo the Mojo asks, hey Justin, do you have a video that showcases your guitar collection? If none, would you be able to come up with one? It would be very interesting. Thank you. Maybe one day I will. I try and keep the channel a lot more just factual in terms of information, in terms of Mayer's Tone, some Frusciante, Cardinal Black, Foo Fighters stuff, and kind of really whatever artists I'm interested in. But maybe if that's something eventually you guys would like, just even like a little like studio gear corner tour, maybe I could do that at some point. Could be cool, just to give you guys a little bit more behind the scenes of, you know, kind of what the space looks like and how it functions. Fat Sea Turtle asks, do you got eyes for that Brent Mason signature telly, Justin? This is in regards to the last Q&A where people were just asking me my thoughts on tellies. No, I didn't have my eye on that one. L. Gulcher asks, do you miss the Klon or not really? And what's your current go-to light overdrive pedal? Also, I would strongly recommend you trying out a Univibe. They're really fun. All right, first part, do I miss the Klon? I do in a way. I don't miss the tone because the tone is easily accessible. You can go grab any half-decent Klon Centaur clone or Klon style pedal and get 90% of the way there for, you know, pretty affordable price points. I miss just having the piece of history, and when I would look down at the board and just seeing my Klon Centaur there, I just thought it was cool because of what it was and the fact that I got to just experience one and be its custodian for a while. I just really like. So I miss that aspect of having just that piece of gear history, but the tones for right now, I don't totally miss. The new Vemoram Klon kind of style pedal looks pretty interesting to try out. For light overdrive, right now I'm using my Keeley modded blues driver, but the plan is to replace that with an Analog Man King of Tone whenever I do get around to ordering one. As for the Univibe, 100% I need to get one and try one out. That's down the list for things I want to acquire, but I definitely will try one out hopefully sooner than later. This one's from the Panda Procrastinates. Are you able to get all the tones you like with the 2-Rock Traditional Clean? And what speakers are you using nowadays? Yeah, the Traditional Clean is very good at just being that pure pedal platform, ultra beautiful, clean sorts of sounds. And it's very sculptable too because it is such a nice pedal platform. For different tones that I'm trying to go for, I find that if I'm wanting to do something a little bit more in the Foo Fighters vein, I mean, I use the Electric Lightning, the Chris Buck Thorpe Effects signature pedal. I find that that pedal, to me at least, it can do kind of the Rat sort of thing. I've never played a Rat, but I plan on getting one to do some like kind of more Johnny Buckland, even like Foo Fighters sorts of sounds, even like U2 kind of things in a way, just lightly. But I find the Electric Lightning really is helping to push my rig into more of that direction of those kind of tones I'm wanting, so I'm very heavily relying on that pedal. But because the TC is so easily sculptable, I can really get any of the tones that I'm kind of currently wanting to out of it. The JHS Clover preamp as well is one that I'm looking to get just to kind of have a bit of a different, just get me into a bit of a different bass sound out of the TC. So hopefully that kind of does what I'm looking for as well. But I really find that the Traditional Clean pairs well with like a Fender style of amplifier, which is what I'm currently doing, just to kind of give a little bit of a different flavor, and the way the Fender amps respond as well is just very different than something like the TC. We interrupt this Q&A because I just had something delivered, so I thought, why not open it on camera for you guys? I was about to answer what speakers I'm currently using, which are the 2-Rock 12 speakers, I think is what they're called. Basically their own version of like the G12 65. And then in my Vibreverb, I have a JBL D130F that I'm using out of that. So those would be the speakers I'm currently using. The J-Mods have the actual Celestion G12 65s in there. And then through my Marshall JMP2203, it has greenbacks in it, but I don't totally use that amplifier that often, but those are kind of what I got going on at least. As for this package, kind of in the process of making my own pedal board and expanding the sounds, which is a video I kind of made talking about my own gear journey. The Eventide H9 Max, the limited edition blue finish. This is the only one for sale in Canada that I was able to find. So I obviously wanted to acquire it before anyone else bought it because I think the kind of matte blue finish just looks really great. But this is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for my upcoming pedal board build that I'm slowly working on. I want to kind of see if I might use a little bit of MIDI to be able to make some different presets a little bit more easily accessible. The Eventide H9 Max is a new addition. I've been waiting at home for it to show up all day, and I have some errands I need to run later, so at least it's showing up now and I can leave my house and go about my day. But anyways, let's continue on with the Q&A. Jelmer Toering asks, will Texas Special pickups be good enough to sound like JM? If not, what pickups would be the best? Texas Specials definitely can do the JM sort of thing. I feel like they're a little bit more accurate to kind of some of John's earlier tones in his career, like the heavier things era with the SRV Strat, Texas Specials and those. The whole story about them being underwound, though, giving him that more unique sound that then the Big Dippers were based on. In my custom shop Strat, I have the hand-wound Texas Specials, so kind of similar, but also kind of not. I like them. I haven't not enjoyed them enough where I've been running out to replace them with a different pickup, but it's something I've talked about really doing ever since I got the guitar, because they're also not the favorite sound I've ever heard from a Strat. If we're talking about best, at least what I'm planning on doing for my Strat is Ron Ellis pickups, probably the 64s, just because my Strats, I wanted to kind of base it on a 64, and those pickups I think seem to be kind of the best to do that specific thing. But Texas Specials will do that tone. They're just not personally my absolute favorite, even though I haven't had a ton of experience with pickups. They have that SRV kind of, I'm not sure if honk is the right term for it, but I feel like a lot of you guys will get what I'm trying to say. Just, it has that little bit, it's almost too much SRV in terms of the tone. All right, now we're moving on to some other ones from my Instagram. This one's from Anthony Alfier Music. Any issues with the TS10 at all? Build quality with those can be questionable. Best TS in my opinion, though. I've personally not had any, this is wood, right? Knock on wood. I've never had any issues with my TS10. I am always just very cautious when I step on it, though I'm not stomping on it, just like I was with like the Mark I Aquapus and a lot of the pedals, for example. I try and be a bit more gentle with it. This one I did find on Kijiji, which is kind of like a Canadian Craigslist, I guess, kind of a local buy and sell thing that's not like Facebook Marketplace. I found it for like 90 bucks Canadian 7-8 years ago. So I don't really know the history of the pedal, but I've had no issues, and let's just hope it keeps on going. But yeah, great pedals. Lots of other ones do that sound, though. I wouldn't go out and pay what TS10s are currently going for on like Reverb at this point. It's just too crazy. And yeah, you could always risk it breaking too. The Panda asks, how do you like your 2-Rock TC? Does it get all the sounds you need? And is it close to the JM Sig? I've answered kind of the first two parts of this question. I absolutely love my 2-Rock Traditional Clean. That's, a dead-on given. But I picked this question because of the last part, is it close to the JM Sig? Kind of fitting today too, I'm wearing my 2-Rock t-shirt, lots of 2-Rock questions today. The best way to think about it in terms of 2-Rock's lineage, their amplifier history, is that the John Mayer Signature is the grandfather of the Traditional Clean. The Traditional Clean is just an evolution of that circuit, which the John Mayer Signature was an evolution of the custom Reverb Signature. So yes, it can get very close. It's slightly different. Kind of the way to think about it is that it's better in a way where it has a little bit more of a sonic range compared to what the JM Sig does. The JM Sig, I think if you obviously had the chance to buy one and you wanted to do purely the Mayer thing, that would be the winner. But tonally wise, the 2-Rock Traditional Clean can do the Mayer thing exceptionally well, and then just a little bit more also. If you want a video where you can hear the two amplifiers being actually dead on shot out, my really good friends Jake Loosemore and the TheLondonGuitarist went and took Jake's 2-Rock Traditional Clean against the TheLondonGuitarist John Mayer Signature, and they played them out, did the settings, and they sound 99.9% the same basically. In the room, I know there was some more differences, but I'll link that video in the description down below for you guys if you want to check it out. But definitely the TC can do the Mayer thing and then more. Next one is from Costin Hathcock. Has John ever used a phase effect outside of Dead and Company? The only time that I can think of that John ever had a phaser on the board that wasn't in the context of Dead and Company would be for the Search for Everything World Tour. There was a phase 90 on the board, but I believe that was used for Grateful Dead covers that John did the odd time during that tour. I'm not 100% certain, but off the top of my head, that's the main context in which it was used. So he has, but at the same time, he's still just doing Grateful Dead songs, so not really using it outside of that context either way. Frail Mano asks, favorite Silver Sky finish? Just got mine in Dodge and Blue. Love it. Dodge and Blue for me is up there. When I was looking at Silver Skies initially, I was kind of between Mock Sand and Dodge and Blue. Faded Black Tea as well is great. Roxy Pink is great, but if I had to go with my favorite finish, it's Nebula. Also just because I did own a Nebula Silver Sky, and that guitar was just so cool. I think Nebula is for sure the best finish that they've ever done and probably will ever do. But in terms of a more production run, I just love earth tones. I think Mock Sand is the matte version, the satin version. It's just such a good looking guitar. Mock Sand would be number one, probably Dodge and Blue or even Venetian Blue next. This one's from Adam Quarby. If you had to choose one pedal for life, what would it be? Ooh, that's a difficult one. If you only had one pedal for the rest of your life, what would it be? Who knows? Might end up being the H9 because it can do so much. Out of the stuff that's on my board, I'm just looking down at it right now. Maybe the Electric Lightning, actually, because it's so sculptable with like the 3-band EQ that you can tweak the treble, the bass, the mids. It's got a boost in it as well. Probably that one out of everything that's on the board, just because it has that flexibility of the boost in it as well, and it can get a wide range of really phenomenal tones. Plus, the pedal just feels good with the tube in it under the fingers too. It has that characteristic that just, I don't know, whether you believe or not that tube pedals have something to them. I personally do. I really like it. Like, one of my other favorite pedals of all time was the Zen Drive 2, had a tube in it as well. There's something, just in my opinion at least, to the whole tube in a pedal thing. So probably the Electric Lightning. This one's from Osane. I know you love Shifty and the Foos. Would you ever try and recreate his rig? I'm definitely moving on from the whole full-on recreating rigs at this point. I think that's, I'm trying to highlight that a little bit on the channel as well and go through my own gear journey. But I would love just to add to the collection eventually some of the amplifiers that the Foos have used. I believe there's actually a Shiflett signature kind of BD-100 Friedman amplifier that's coming out. I think Chris, in one of the rig rundowns that they did kind of semi-recently, kind of teased that him and Dave Friedman were working on something like that. That could be really cool.
I can tell you, I don't know if Dave Friedman wants me talking about this, but there might be a Chris Shiflett signature Dave Friedman amp in the works. Yeah, it's very early days, but so we've been talking about it.
I'm guessing it would jump off the HBE here, the brown egg. It would jump off like this platform.
I can't talk about it, man.
I'm sorry.
It's a scoop.
I'm here digging deep.
A BD-100 in general, I think, would be a really awesome amp. Even the 90s Fender Tone Master that Dave has used a lot, I think would be pretty cool too. So in terms of getting some of those amplifiers, even like an old Mesa and like the revision versions that like the Foo Fighters used back in the day, one of those amplifiers I think would be really cool just to have something that does do a bit more of the higher gain thing. But in terms of fully recreating the rig, probably not. Maxie Wang asks, favorite Cardinal Black song? This is difficult. It was originally Where Do You Go?
Where do you go? 'Cause I wanna know. Where do you go? Where do you go? Where do you go? Think about my naive alone.
Then there's this live stream version of Rise Up that made that my favorite Cardinal Black song.
I'm so poor.
But then the live version of Holding My Breath is right up there too. I think that might be my favorite Chris Buck tone ever. One of those three, just any given day it could change. Next one is from Jackson Tennant 11. Tips for setting a blues driver. I can't seem to make mine sound good. Okay, I'm going to contradict what I said earlier just a tiny bit, but I knew that going in advance with the questions I selected. When it comes to the blues driver, I kind of felt a similar thing, to be honest. It was a little bit difficult to get it to actually sound right, but I went and kind of more followed Mayer's settings, and I'll throw up a photo of one of John's board shots from the trio era, where you can see that everything is below noon as for all the knobs. They're more like 11:30. And when I did that and then just tweaked it from that point kind of to my taste, just going like below 12 o'clock, that's where I actually found that I personally even really liked the BD-2. I always find the tone kind of needs to be below that as well in order for at least what I kind of like it to sound like. For me as well, like the whole debate about, or the topic where I mentioned, you know, your amp rig, everything goes into play there. I at least have it, in terms of the amp rig, very similar to what John was using during the trio era. I have a Vibroverb with the JBL speaker. I have a two-rock Traditional clean working together. I got the Strat, kind of very much in the JM3 vein that way. So I find that in the context of John's settings, for me, this is one of the only cases where I found that very close to them work very well for me. But I would just try something like that, because I feel like kind of the thing, I think Mick on that pedal show made a joke about it in one episode a while back, but he was like, oh, you get a new pedal, kind of the thing you do is turn all the knobs to 2 o'clock. And that kind of is what you base your initial impressions of the pedal on. And I feel like it's a little bit uncommon to actually turn everything down below 12 o'clock. And that's even, you think about the Rat, the reason why they swapped the, I believe it was the tone to the filter knob. You got to watch Josh Scott's history of the Rat. But one of the revisions was actually just for a user experience of where they swapped the pot around in versions so that it's the exact same thing basically, but instead you're turning the knob up to go for kind of the more pleasant tone that people were wanting rather than turning it down. For just me kind of paraphrasing off the top of my head. So just that whole user experience is kind of an interesting topic even in and of itself when you're looking at pedal settings. But the point being, long way around it, try the knobs below 12 o'clock on your blues driver. That's the way I have mine, looking right at it. And I think you might enjoy it a little bit more, because personally, I don't really like it with the knobs up kind of past, you know, around 1:30, 2 o'clock. I personally don't like that sound. So give that a try and maybe you'll find some better tones out of it. And that is going to conclude episode 3 for the Q&A series. I hope you guys enjoyed and liked all the questions that I picked. Like I said at the beginning, if you want your question featured in the next episode, leave it in the comments down below, because that's where I'm going to be prioritizing what questions I choose from. And it just makes my life a little bit easier too, so I do appreciate it. Until the next video, you guys, take care, and I'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.